Before we get into the video, the one thing I will say is that the DRC has a lot of topics that are there's a lot going on, and because this is supposed to be a video going over just the overall history and being pretty short, specific things like the tensions after World War II and the Congo Wars, I'm not going to go too deep in, so I would recommend checking out other videos for that. But let's get to the history. The area now known as the Democratic Republic of the Congo was populated as early as 90,000 years ago, as shown by the 1988 discovery of a harpoon at Katanda, one of the oldest barbed harpoons ever found, which is believed to have been used to catch giant river catfish. By the 13th century, there were three main confederations of states in the western Congo basin. In the east were the Seven Kingdoms of Congo, considered to be the oldest and most powerful, which likely included Nsundi, Mabata, Mabongo, and possibly Kundi and Okanga. South of these were Pemba, which stretched from modern-day Angola to the Congo River. It included various kingdoms as well. To its west, across the Congo River, was a confederation of three smaller states as well. The Kingdom of Congo existed from the 14th to the early 19th century. Until the arrival of the Portuguese, it was a dominant force in the region, along with the Kingdom of Luba, the Kingdom of Lunda, the Mongo people, and the Yanziku Kingdom. The Congo Free State was a corporate state privately controlled by Leopold II of Belgium through the Association Internationale Africaine, a non-governmental organization. Leopold was the sole shareholder and chairman. The state included the entire area of the present-day Democratic Republic of the Congo. Under Leopold II, the Congo Free State became one of the most infamous international scandals of the turn of the 20th century. The report of the British consul Roger Casement led to the arrest and punishment of white officials who had been responsible for cold-blooded killings during a rubber-collecting expedition in 1900, including a Belgian national who caused the shooting of at least 122 Congolese natives. Estimates of the total death toll vary considerably. The first census was only done in 1924, so it is even more difficult to quantify the population loss of the period. Roger Casement's famous 1904 report estimated 10 million people. According to Casement's report, indiscriminate war, starvation, reduction of births, and tropical diseases caused the country's depopulation. European and U.S. press agencies exposed the conditions in the Congo Free State to the public in 1900. By 1908, public and diplomatic pressure had led Leopold II to annex the Congo as a Belgian Congo colony. On November 15, 1908, King Leopold II of Belgium formally relinquished personal control of the Congo Free State. The renamed Belgian Congo was put under the direct administration of the Belgian government and its Ministry of Colonies. Belgian rule in the Congo was based around the colonial trinity of state, missionary, and private company interests. The privileging of Belgian commercial interests meant that large amounts of capital flowed into the Congo and the individual regions became specialized. The interests of the government and private enterprise became closely tied. The state helped companies break strikes and remove other barriers imposed by the indigenous population. The country was split into nesting, hierarchically organized administrative subdivisions, and run uniformly according to a set native policy. In contrast to the British and the French, who generally favored the system of indirect rule, whereby traditional leaders were retained in positions of authority under colonial oversight. There was also a high degree of racial segregation. Large numbers of white immigrants who moved to the Congo after the end of World War II came from across the social spectrum, but were nonetheless always treated as superior to the natives. During the 1940s and 1950s, the Congo experienced an unprecedented level of urbanization, and the colonial administration began various development programs aimed at making the territory into a model colony. Notable advances were made in treating diseases. One of the results of these measures was the development of a new middle class in the cities. By the 1950s, the Congo had a wage labor force twice as large as in any other African colony. The Congo's rich natural resources, including uranium, much of the uranium used by the U.S. nuclear program during World War II was Congolese, led to substantial interest in the region from both the Soviet Union and the United States as the Cold War developed. The political tension inside the Congo, Kinshasa, was ever so growing during and after the latter stages of World War II. These political tensions included the disassociation with Belgium in the people's minds, the future concerns in regions of the modern Congo like Katanga in the south and the northeast, rebel groups, and much more. But like I said in the beginning of this video, these topics are very deep, so I recommend watching or learning the specifics on a different video. Following the riots in Leopoldville and in Stanleyville, the Belgians realized they could not maintain control of such a vast country in the face of rising demands for independence. Belgian and Congolese political leaders held a roundtable conference in Brussels beginning on January 1960. At the end of the conference, on January 27, 1960, it was announced that elections would be held in Congo on May the 22nd of the same year, and full independence granted on June 30th of that year. The elections produced the nationalist Lubumba as prime minister and Kasavubu as president. On independence, the country adopted the name Republic of the Congo. But the French colony of Middle Congo also chose the name Republic of the Congo upon its independence, so the two countries were more commonly known as Congo Leopoldville and Congo Brazzaville after their capital cities. In 1960, the country was very unstable. Regional tribal leaders held far more power than the central government, and with the departure of the Belgian administrators, almost no skilled bureaucrats remained in the country. The first Congolese graduated from university only in 1956, and very few in the new nation had any idea how to manage a country of such size. On July of 1960, a military mutiny by Congolese soldiers against their European officers broke out in the capital, and rampant looting began. On July of 1960 as well, the richest province of the country, Katanga, seceded. The United Nations sent 20,000 peacekeepers to protect Europeans in the country and try to restore order. Western paramilitaries and mercenaries, often hired by mining companies to protect their interests, also began pouring into the country. In this period, Congo's second richest province, Kasai, also announced its independence on August 8, 1960. After trying to get help from the United States and the United Nations, Prime Minister turned to the USSR for assistance. Khrushchev agreed to help, offering advanced weaponry and technical advisors. The United States viewed the Soviet presence as an attempt to take advantage of the situation and gain a proxy state in Sub-Sahara and Africa. UN forces were ordered to block any shipments of arms into the country. The United States also looked for a way to replace Lubumba as lead leader. President Kasavubu had clashed with the Prime Minister and advocated an alliance with the West rather than the Soviets. The US sent weapons and CIA personnel to aid forces allied with the President and combat the Soviet presence. Unrest and rebellion plagued the government until November of 1965, when the lieutenant, by then commander-in-chief of the National Army, seized control of the country and declared himself president for the next 5 years. Mobutu, which is the lieutenant, quickly consolidated his power. This by the Stanleyville mutinies of 1966 and 1967, and was elected unopposed as president in a sham election in 1970 for a 7-year term. Embarking on a campaign of cultural awareness, President Mobutu renamed the country the Republic of Zaire in 1971 and required citizens to adopt African names and drop their French language ones. As the Cold War came to a close, internal and external pressures on Mobutu increased. In late 89 and early 1990, Mobutu was weakened by the series of domestic protests, by heightened international criticism of his regime's human rights practices, by a faltering economy, and by government corruption, most notably his own massive embezzlement of government funds for personal use. In April 1990, Mobutu declared the Third Republic, agreeing to a limited multi-party system with free elections and a constitution. As details of the reforms were delayed, soldiers in September of 1991 began looting Kinshasa to protest their unpaid wages. 2,000 French and Belgian troops, some of whom were flown in on U.S. Air Force planes, arrived to evacuate the 20,000 endangered foreign nationals in the capital. In 1992, after previous similar attempts, the Long Province Sovereign National Conference was staged, encompassing over 2,000 representatives from various political parties. The conference gave itself a legislative mandate and elected Pasigna as its chairman, along with the leader of the UDPS as prime minister. By the end of the year, Mobutu had created a rival government with its own prime minister. The ensuing stalemate produced a compromise merger of the two governments into a High Council of a Republic Parliament transition in 1994, with Mobutu as head of state and Dondo as prime minister. Although presidential and legislative elections were scheduled repeatedly over the next 2 years, they never took place. By 1996, tensions from the war and genocide in neighboring Rwanda had spilled over into Zaire. Rwandan Hutu militia forces who had fled Rwanda following the ascension of the Tutsi-led government had been using Hutu refugee camps in eastern Zaire as bases for incursions into Rwanda. In October of 1996, Rwandan forces attacked refugee camps in the Ruzizi Plain near the intersection of the Congolese, Rwandan, and Burundian borders meet, scattering refugees. They took Uvira, then Bukavu, Goma, and Mugunga, which are all cities. Hutu militia forces soon allied with the Zairean armed forces to launch a campaign against Congolese ethnic Tutsis in eastern Zaire. In turn, these Tutsis formed a militia to defend themselves against attacks. When the Zairean government began to escalate the massacres in November of 96, Tutsi militias erupted in rebellion against Mobutu. The Tutsi militia was joined by various opposition groups and supported by several countries, including Rwanda and Uganda. This coalition, they became known as the AFDL. The AFDL, now seeking the broader goal of ousting Mobutu, made significant military gains in early 1997. Various Zairean politicians who had unsuccessfully opposed the dictatorship of Mobutu for many years now saw an opportunity for them in the invasion of Zaire by two of the region's strongest military forces. Following failed peace talks between Mobutu and Kabila in May of 97, Mobutu left the country on May 16th. The AFDL entered Kinshasa unopposed a day later, and Kabila named himself president, reverting the name of the country to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. He marched into Kinshasa on May the 20th and consolidated power around himself and the AFDL. In September of 1997, Mobutu died in exile in Morocco. Kabila demonstrated little ability to manage the problems of his country and lost his allies. To counterbalance the power and influence of Rwanda and DRC, Ugandan troops created another rebel movement called the Movement for the Liberation of Congo, led by the Congolese warlords. They attacked in August of 1998, backed by Rwandan and Ugandan troops. Soon afterwards, Angola, Namibia, and Zimbabwe became involved militarily in the Congo, with Angola and Zimbabwe supporting the government. While the 6 African countries involved in the war signed a ceasefire accord in Lusaka in July of 1999, the Congolese rebels did not, and the ceasefire broke down within months. Kabila was assassinated in 2001 by a bodyguard, who was then shot dead, according to Justice Minister Moise Kongolo. Another account of the assassination says that the real killer escaped. Kabila was succeeded by his son Joseph. Upon taking office, Kabila called for multilateral peace talks to end the war. Kabila partially succeeded when a further peace deal was brokered between him, Uganda, and Rwanda, leading to the apparent withdrawal of foreign troops. Currently, the Ugandans and the MLC still hold a 200-mile wide section of the north of the country. Rwandan forces and its front control a large section of the east, and government forces or their allies hold the west and south of the country. There were reports that the conflict is being prolonged as a cover for extensive looting of the substantial natural resources in the country, including diamonds, copper, zinc, and coltan. The conflict was reignited in January of 2002 by ethnic clashes in the northeast, and both Uganda and Rwanda then halted their withdrawal and sent in more troops. Talks between Kabila and their rebel leaders, held in Sun City, lasted a full 6 weeks, beginning in April 2002. In June, they signed a peace accord under which Kabila would share power with former rebels. By June of 2003, all foreign armies, except those of Rwanda, had pulled out of the Congo. Few people in the Congo have been unaffected by the conflict. A survey conducted in 2009 by the ICRC and Ipsos appears that 3/4 or 76% of the people interviewed had been affected in some way, either personally or due to a wider consequences of armed conflict. The response of the international community had been incommensurate with the scale of the disaster resulting from the war in the Congo. Its support for political and diplomatic efforts to end the war had been relatively consistent, but it had taken no effective steps to abide by repeated pledges to demand accountability for the war crimes and crimes against humanity that were routinely committed in the Congo. The United Nations Security Council and the UN Secretary General had frequently denounced human rights abuses and the humanitarian disaster that the war unleashed on the local population, but had shown little will to tackle the responsibility of occupying powers for the atrocities taking place in areas under their control, areas where the worst violence in the country took place. In particular, Rwanda and Uganda have escaped any significant sanction for their role. DR Congo had a transitional government in July 2003 until the election was over. A constitution was approved by voters, and on July 30th of 2006, the Congo held its first multi-party elections since independence in 1960. Joseph Kabila took 45% of the votes, and his opponent had 20%. That was the origin of the fight between the two parties in August of 2006 in the streets of the capital, Kinshasa. 16 people died before policemen and MONUC took control of the city. A new election was held on October 29, 2006, which Kabila won with 70% of the vote. Bemba had described election irregularities. On December 6, 2006, Joseph Kabila was sworn in as president. The inability of the state and the world's largest United Nations peacekeeping force to provide security throughout the vast country had led to an emergence of up to 120 armed groups by 2018, perhaps the largest number in the world. Armed groups often were accused of being proxies or being supported by regional governments interested in eastern Congo's vast mineral wealth. Some argue that much of the lack of security by the National Army is strategic on the part of the government, who let the army profit from illegal logging and mining operations in return for loyalty. Different rebel groups often target civilians by ethnicity, and militias often become oriented around ethnic local militias. Anyways, this is pretty much it for the main history of the DRC, so let's get into some fun facts. Number 1. The DRC boasts the Virunga National Park, which is the oldest national park in Africa as a whole. Number 2, which is at 4,700 kilometers, the Congo River is Africa's second largest river after the Nile. It is also known as the world's deepest river. The capitals of the two Congos, Kinshasa and Brazzaville, are the closest capital cities in the world, not including Rome and the Vatican, which is not a UN member. The capital, Kinshasa, is the world's largest French-speaking country, even more French speakers than Paris. And the last fact is that the Congo Basin is the world's second largest rainforest, which encompasses a lot of the DRC. Anyways, that's it for this video. I'll see y'all next time.